Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
Hello.
Hey Ryan, how are you?
Yeah, fine, and you?
Good. Do you know what today is?
No, what's today?
It's Dune release day.
Oh, is it today?
At least in the US, yeah.
I'm so far removed from movies and TV and stuff that I didn't realize there was a new James Bond that came out like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So you lined up to go and watch?
Well, they're streaming out on HBO Max at 6 p.m. So starting at 6 p.m., you can start watching it. So I'm just going to watch it from home. Although I'm sure on the big screen, the sandworms and everything would be very cool, but
yeah,
go with the convenience.
When you have young kids, the thought of going to a movie is more like a real adventure because the kids are going to be looked after and all that kind of stuff. At least till they're both old enough to listen to loud volume sounds and watch some of this stuff. So everything for us is at home on the TV. So there's nothing wrong with that. In the end, you're consuming it one way or another.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about that finally after more than a year.
Yeah, well, there's so many movies that have been delayed. Dune is one. I think the James Bond was delayed a year. I think Top Gun 2 was delayed. So I don't know when that's coming out. It's going to be interesting to see how streaming takes over from cinema. Because I think Black Widow was also only released on Disney. It wasn't actually released on in cinema.
I know there's concern with Dune that if it doesn't get the if it doesn't get the numbers because people are watching it from home, although they said they're going to count the streams towards the, that contributes to how they're judging the performance of the film. But we'll see. People are afraid they're not going to have a sequel if it doesn't do well, but apparently it's already booked for a Dune 2. So,
I think this is the Netflix effect. There are so many things that probably don't deserve a sequel, but they get them anyway because the subscription pay for it. Because you only really need a few. You don't need everyone to like. You just need a certain amount. I mean, there's so many series. If you think back many years ago, that were cancelled because the ratings on the networks weren't high enough. But there were actually huge followings, like Stargate, for example. Stargate Atlantis, Stargate SG-1, and SG-1 did 10 seasons. I think that was enough. But Atlantis was cut short at 5, and that could have gone on for another 5 easily. And then Universe was only 2, and that could have also gone on for another 8, 20, because that was like the ultimate one. But because they didn't get the ratings, they were killed. And then I was thinking about the other Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I don't know if you ever watched. It's a guy, he mocks B-grade horror movies. But that was brought back because it was funded by a Kickstarter campaign. And that's now being picked up by Netflix. And I think that's what happens. What was the other one that I was watching that I really liked that was picked up by Netflix or Amazon? The Expanse. The Expanse was going to be cancelled and it was picked up by Amazon, I think. And that's a really good science fiction series. So I think what's going to happen, all these sequels, I think they'll just keep churning them out because there's a willing consumer even if it's just one?
We will see. I think obviously it was a star-studded cast for Dune, so hopefully it's a good one. I just watched I'm going to butcher his name, Jablansky's Dune, the documentary on the Dune that was never made.
Oh, okay. So
I don't know if you've seen the David Lynch adaptation, right?
Yeah.
So
painful to watch.
Yeah, it's not. I really like David Lynch as the director, but that movie is not it. I mean, he didn't even want to put his name on it. He put a pseudonym out, at least on some of them. But so there was a director who had tried to adapt Dune first, and he was a surrealist, like very eccentric director who put out these kind of avant-garde films prior to that. And then he got the opportunity to do a new project. He was like, I want to do Dune, even though he hadn't even read the book at that point. So they greenlighted him to do that. And he assembled his team and a star-studded cast of Salvador Dali as the emperor, and who else did he have? I don't recall at this point. It's too early in the morning, but anyway, he sunk all of this effort and these like insanely creative people into this project, and they came out with this kind of art book that's like a tome of like a flip book almost of what the movie would be. And then he took it to the Hollywood studios, and they were like, it was the 70s. It was before Star Wars. And they were like, yeah, I don't think so. Basically that they didn't, he was kind of this edgy, art director. And they were like, we're not going to greenlight this, which was heartbreaking for him. But it's a really interesting documentary. I do recommend, watching it. And there's a lot of cool art that they came up with and everything. And they explain how, even though the movie was never made, the influences bled into a lot of the other sci-fi fantasy stuff that has come out since. So, but yeah, that happened. And then later, because of that, the David Lynch film got made, which, yeah.
I mean, Dune is one of those epic, I don't want to say space operas, I guess, that you can see it in lots of other things. Jupiter Ascending was a very good movie where the spice wasn't spice, it was humans. But it was still it's the same sort of things, family versus family, all the inner workings. And I would, someone that to try and do Dune without reading the book, I think would never do it justice, because that, the book is so complicated in a good way. To build the film, it requires that sort of knowledge.
He did read it, but just not when he decided that he's going to make the book into a film. He had not read it at that point.
Well, because there's 7 or 8 books, I think. I've only read one, and I'll be honest, I found it very difficult to read. I found the English very difficult to sort of follow. When you've got time to read, you want to read books that are easy to read or keep you enthralled. And that's why I was hoping the movie would come out, because, maybe the movie's a better interpretation.
Yeah, we'll see. I started Dune Messiah, which is the second one. But yeah, I know the series kind of gets weird as it goes on. But I thought, apart from me being super excited about finally getting to watch Dune and having that to look forward to tonight, there's a lot of talk that's been going on about the metaverse. And I thought, we could essentially have a sci-fi episode. So, Dune and the metaverse don't necessarily connect, right? Because Dune's kind of post-technology. Well, computers are humans at that point. They've evolved like past that, I suppose. But with Facebook, everything that's been happening at Facebook, but then the rumors or I don't know if they've officially announced anything yet, but kind of changing the name of their company to a parent company name like Google has with Alphabet, and then putting a lot more focus on the idea of the metaverse. So what's your impression of all of that?
So the first thing is I'd probably say that Facebook is changing their parent company name because of bad publicity.
Of course, yeah.
Not because of anything else really. But I think, I mean, there has been a few sort of mentions of it in the press the last couple of weeks, maybe even months. Zuckerberg being one of them. So my understanding of the metaverse, maybe to start with that. This is a progression from what we currently have, and let's call this what we currently have, Web 2.0, maybe 2.5, which is, the ability to communicate via various apps, so WhatsApp, pick your Telegram, Signal, etc., and do that communication not only as text but as voice or video as well. Now, the next step up for me on that, which is what I think they're trying to get to with the metaverse, is that you're now going to be able to virtually interact in a shared space. And if you remember, we talked about the Future of Work book called Shift, I think it is, where you wake up in the morning and you're still in your pajamas and you haven't even brushed your teeth, but you put on your headset and you join the meeting in your business suit and you talk to your colleagues for a 7 a.m. meeting. It's that kind of thing, where you could, in theory, live a whole separate life in a different universe, hence the meta and the verse. And, I was listening to something today about it, funny enough, and they were saying things like, imagine if you could live this, you have when you join into your metaverse, you got a different apartment where it's set up a certain way, but that's because you're really unconstrained to how you want it to be. And your constraints will be probably, if being Facebook, it'll probably be you'd be paying for something either with your information or some sort of advertising. So you would have a SMEG fridge and a SMEG coffee machine and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's an inevitable step for us because we're all getting used to being at home and not traveling to places unnecessarily, and there will be a need to do some sort of face-to-face, at least to see body language, all that kind of stuff. Being able to do that virtually would be really cool. And I'd probably see it, in the long term, us wearing suits that would pick up body movements and having sensors and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of application in that if you think about how your body temperature changes, how you react to things, and how that stuff can be picked up. If you think about doing a negotiation in that would be quite interesting. The other thing that I was trying to get to, and I kind of lost my train of thought on it, but this connection into a universe, I don't think it should be owned by any company. I think that should be, and this is where the governments, and maybe we need a world government, God forbid. But if you're going to log into Facebook, because you're going into this verse, you're going to be disconnecting from the real world. There's going to have to be anchors to keep you back in the real world, and also to break you out in case you're spending too much time in there. And if you think some of the science fiction movies where people have been stuck in they prefer that life because it's better than their current life, and they become these fat slobs. And I'm thinking about what was that movie, WALL-E? Mm-hmm. Where they're living on the space stations and they don't walk anymore because they just join into the metaverse or whatever they call it there. So I think it's going to be it's an interesting step, but this could be decades away from being real.
Yeah, I was reading up a little bit on it last night, and it seemed like 10 to 20 years away from fully realizing the tech. And they were comparing sort of what we have now in the AR VR space to the chunky cell phones of the 90s. And that, that's the kind of difference what we should expect to progress through in the next decade.
Yeah. I would almost say this is one of those areas where you don't want to be the first mover, or you don't want to publicly go and say you're the first mover. So I find the strategy quite strange to go and put it out there that we're doing this metaverse stuff. I can't see the reason to be vocal about it yet. I'd rather, they've had Oculus and they've had the other one for ages. And those games and they really are games, are getting better and better, but they're still not at a price point that you or me would just go and buy one tomorrow. Like you just go buy a phone tomorrow if you had to. But you're not going to buy a headset just because you feel like it. And I'm interested to see where, I almost feel like there's a stepping stone before that. And I'm interested to see what Apple comes out with their glasses. I think they're going to be about $300 or $400, which is not a lot of money if you're already spending $1,000 on a phone and $300 on the headphones and all the rest of it, to go and spend another $300 on the glasses. And that's where AR and VR, AR and MR would be used. And I'd almost see how that goes first before even talking about the metaverse. But what would be nice is, we're doing this meeting obviously on video. And I think I mentioned this book to you. It's the Bobbyverse. And this is where the consciousness gets, a guy dies and his consciousness gets put into a probe, and he has to go out and basically save the human race by finding a new habitable planet, and he self-replicates. So he builds more Bobs, and hence becomes the Bobbyverse. But what each Bob does to stay sane is they build themselves a virtual world, and inside the virtual world, each one has their own sort of preferences, because as they create more and more instances of themselves, there's a bit of drift away from the original Bob. And, they meet up in the virtual worlds in order to talk to each other and interact. And over time, one or two other people switch. When they die, they also pass into the virtual world. And they become immortal because they are now, you live as long as your backup. So if you die, if your spaceship gets blown up, you can come, and you got a backup, you can be restored into another cradle or another spaceship. The reason why I bring that up is because it would be nice, you and I, 20,000 kilometers away from each other, is just to know that we're going to be meeting, to sit in your chair and I sit in my chair, and now we sit across from each other, physically, virtually physical, which doesn't make any sense, but you can at least interact more like you're sitting talking to each other. Obviously, you can't drink coffee and eat food like you would at a normal meal, but at least you feel like you're interacting. And I would like to see that happen before we get into maybe I think too small, before worrying about getting, how many Facebook people, there's 2 billion, onto a metaverse.
Yeah. I mean, a couple thoughts there. So I know that the virtual meeting tech with like HoloLens, that some of that exists today. Obviously it's not very widespread, but that kind of I think what's being worked on there now is the kind of quality of the hologram to get rid of some of that uncanny valley. Or obviously, if we had the ability to do it now, but we were very, like the avatars were extremely cartoonish and almost like really bad video game design, or, not very realistic. It's, it doesn't feel quite right. And then my other thought with where else could the metaverse go is just, it all comes back to a lot of sci-fi, where these ideas have been explored a lot. But just thinking about like Avatar, and even when that movie came out, and I don't know really how, I remember there being news about this, but I don't know how big this really was, but people who were basically depressed that they couldn't live in the Avatar planet, and that, the experience that James Cameron created, people were wanted that kind of like, ability to live in it, like you could potentially in a metaverse.
Yeah, so now I remember what I wanted to say to you. So there's a physicist, and I never remember his name. He's well known, Let me see if I can find his name. I don't want to bastardize it, but his theory on if we ever want to travel to other planets is, we're not going to send our biological selves. We're going to send our consciousness through laser transmission or something like that. So you would send yourself from Earth to Mars, for example, as a transmission. You'd arrive there and you'd go into a physical being, and let's say, for argument's sake, it's an android, that you could walk and experience the immersion. Maybe that is the way that we actually really do populate the cosmos, as opposed to trying to engineer all these other problems that we have to deal with, which are, radiation and all that kind of stuff. The other thing which these guys I was into this morning was saying that, and maybe this ties into the depression thing, or at least experience things in different ways, is, imagine you're two people and you're both male, but now one of you pretends to be female, one of you pretends to be male, and you actually live as different entities, and you do all the things, but you're actually two, outside you're different to what you are inside. And maybe that's, you look at transgender and that sort of stuff, maybe there are people who could try it out, being, male wants to be female, female wants to be male. They can try it out in this virtual world and see how they feel about it, because then you are going to be exposed to other real people before you actually go through, multiple operations and gene therapy and all that sort of stuff to change your core building blocks. I can't see the guy's name. It's Mitch. He's a New York physicist. Sort of bug me until I find it.
Yeah, that is interesting. The idea of it as kind of a safer place, or a place where, you could explore things that you wouldn't in the real world.
So the guy's name is Michio Kaku.
Okay. This all, I've also been reading about how this all intersects with NFTs, which is kind of interesting. So with, things being digital, it's like, how do you kind of have rights to things or assign value within a virtual world? And that's where NFTs are sort of coming in, which is interesting. If you want to go as sci-fi is thinking about like your own consciousness or like ability to live on, and who could potentially own that. But yeah.
I mean, this, and I'm referring to this book again, the Bobbyverse actually covers a lot of this stuff. So when this guy dies, he's put into and then the rules on being put into this virtual world is you have to die. You can't, because the process of getting your consciousness out of the body would kill you anyway. And when he wakes up, he belongs to a faction, and he basically plays the game until he's free, which is when he's now hurtling through space. And once he's out, he figures out through being his background is technology, that there's a couple booby traps in the system that if he doesn't comply, he'll be erased. And he goes and disables all those things. And the guy that helps him when he initially wakes up has told him about all these things. So that's how he figures it out. Once he gets rid of all the booby traps, that allows him to become free, and he basically becomes more human than he was when he was human. And that's avoiding that ownership problem, because I think that would be it'd be a resource that someone would want to own and control.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say yet on the metaverse. I feel like, and it's interesting, some of these ideas in terms of having an avatar, living a different life. There's games like, I think it's called Second Life.
Yeah, Second Life, yeah.
Kind of less immersive experiences, but ways that people have been exploring avatars for a long time. Or, it seems like AR, VR, MR kind of pop up in the public consciousness every once in a while and kind of fade away again. So what I'm most interested to see is if, technologies like 5G, as the infrastructure is kind of there to really popularize these things, kind of how far it goes.
I think, the advent of 5G and even the low Earth orbit satellite internet that Musk is pushing out, Starlink, I think it's called. I think the use cases there that are probably more interesting than the metaverse, which is obviously the social stuff, is if you think about, and this comes back to high-low to an extent, a guy on a vessel trying to repair an engine, and he needs subject matter expert help. And the old way would have been to send pictures and an email. And I say old, even before that would just be an email or some sort of radio conversation. But now if you've got, let's say, Apple Glass, just for an example, using 5G, you can have someone that's sitting in an engineer that's sitting back at port, connected up with the same headset, looking at what that engineer on board is looking at, and they can troubleshoot the issue together because the connectivity is there. And also, because of the machine learning that could be put on the edge, there could be pattern recognition there. And I'm thinking about, some safety examples like, I was watching a thing on Netflix, it's called Bad Sport, and the guy was transporting weed in the ballast tanks of container vessels. And what happened is that there was a leak, and the weed started to decompose, which created methane gas. And what happened is the two welders that were going down to open up the ballast tanks to have a look were using welders that basically lit up the methane. It was an explosion, killed it. Now, if you've got the device, so the Apple Glass, that also has got some sort of sensors on it for vapor and all the rest of it, the safety stuff there, which is on the edge, on the edge device, could also be fed back to Essential. So now you can say things like, well, you're walking down in the hole, and this happens a lot with asphyxiation and explosions and fires and that. If you're detecting that stuff with sensors, your safety approach is very different, or your approach to the situation is very different than you just go walk down there with a flashlight and you're taking the risk. So I think AR and VR in that sense would be more interesting, because your VR version of that is you now take someone that's never been on a vessel, let's say they're in training, and you put them in that situation in VR. And if you look at how good the games graphics are nowadays, it's not like the old blocky sort of, this is virtual. You can actually really be immersed in it. And I think that's far more interesting. And I'm hoping to see more of that stuff coming to life. And I've seen some pretty good ones, but they're still a little bit too 1980s, 1990s graphics that need to be more 2020 graphics.
Yeah, I know those training use cases for like dangerous jobs is one of the use cases that I feel like has really been, you've kind of hit on the two main kind of frontline work use cases, which are the ability to augment like that mixed reality of assessing situation, repairing something, and then the virtual ability to train, learn a new skill, learn how to fight a fire or defuse a bomb or something without any of the risk, but being able to live that situation in a more realistic way than you would maybe through other training simulations. But the idea of the environmental sensors and the safety there is interesting, and would be cool if the iterations of something, like Apple glasses or whatever device comes out for that would include that as a use case. Because I think, the idea of like walking around and essentially being advertised to on my glasses, like that doesn't appeal to me. Basically having like Yelp in my glasses, I don't care for that. Yeah. But having the ability for it to sense air quality or something like that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, you talk about that kind of stuff, but I actually think there is some use for that. So, and this is where all these tools either survive or fail, and it's all about context. So I'll give you an example, and when I give you this example, I want to bear in mind there's a book by Kevin Kelly called I think it's the 15 Eventualities or something. I'll find the book. But one of those things is you are going to give away your data. It's about how much data you want to give away and for what reasons. And the example I'm thinking of, which is tied to having the glasses. So you're driving in your car, you're running out of gas, and you need to fill it up. Now, in South Africa, we've got loyalty systems, for everything. I mean, we've been doing it for a long time. I think we're probably better than most countries at it. But if you now have to put in fuel, you want to know where the best value for money is going to be for your fuel. Now obviously you're going to pay pretty much the same price wherever you go. But from a loyalty point of view, you want to know where the best bang for buck is. So, for example, we went with this example he's building on. And Tuesday night we took the kids out to go get ice creams at the local petrol stop and to put fuel in the car. And my wife's got a loyalty card for one of the pharmacy brands that's tied into the fuel brand. So we went to that petrol station so we get the points. Now, when we got there, I said to her, "Oh, we should have come tomorrow because tomorrow's double points day." Now, that data is freely available, in the sense of the petrol station, the relationship to the pharmacy, the card, the double points, the day of the week, all that stuff's freely available. What's not freely available is that I'm a member and what the status of my fuel tank is. And what I would love to have happen in the sort of sense of the glass is that when we're driving off towards it, some sort of intelligence is working out that we're going there. Or when we get there, it looks at it and says, "You've got enough fuel to come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow for double points." And that should flash on my thing, because that's not advertising. That is pragmatic intelligence that I'd be happy with. But the nonsense that if I'm wearing the glasses and I walk past a shop and the shop says, "Oh, we have a 2-for-1 deal on chips," I don't care. Like that's not useful to me. That's just broadcasting. And I don't want that. I want, you've got all my data because I'm happy to give it to you, Apple, for an example. Give me useful stuff back. And I'm not sure how that would work in practicality, but that would be cool.
Maybe there'd be a mode you could switch on to say, okay, I want to know more information about this business, or, the context, some context about the business.
Well, you could say, "Hey, X, I need to put fuel in." And it'll go, and because the car would be smart as well, it would say, "Oh, well, you've got enough fuel for 55 kilometers, whatever that is in miles, and say it's 30 miles. Based on, it doesn't have to say based on your profile. I recommend you go tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock because your calendar's free, and put in fuel. And you'll get double points with Clicks, which is the brand, and you'll pay X amount per liter. And this is now currently the cheapest price for 95 unleaded gas."
Yeah. No, it would be cool. I know Teslas do have a lot of I think Teslas, some of the other electric cars do help you kind of find charging stations. So that I guess there's kind of one version of that in the wild already that they can show whether, how far away the station is. Do you have the charge to get you there? And then which ones are active, or if there are any out of repair. But yeah, I mean, this is all very interesting stuff, very futuristic. I think the kind of technology that is fun to talk about because it still has a lot of, the potential for a big change. And I'm not shocked that a company like Facebook would want to be the one to try and own that. I just hope they don't succeed.
Yeah, it's a funny one because I regularly debate deleting my Facebook account, and the only thing that keeps me in there is I do find some uses for it now. I don't spend a lot of time on it. I think that's just a self-management thing. But what I am doing is wherever I've used Facebook to log into an application, I'm removing that and I'm replacing that with a different login. Because I just don't trust them, and them as a inverted commas them. And I think that's what's coming up more and more in the press, is that there's a lot of ethical issues there. And also, if you don't have a profile, someone else will have it for you. And that's my other concern, is fake profiles that people pretend to be me. Not that I'm that popular or famous or anything like that, but there are a lot of people that wouldn't think twice about me asking them to be friends. And you mean for various reasons. And you see it often on these platforms where someone, specifically Facebook, where someone will say, please ignore all messages from me, I've been hacked. And that's why I want to control it. But I agree with you. I don't want them to control too much. I think they need to be a little bit more heavily regulated.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. We'll leave it there.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.